How are you, folks? Dave Brown here with the New Populist. Thank you again for joining me. Today, I want to talk about foreign policy and the continuity that exists within our government when it comes to foreign policy. Now, domestic issues, we do see some change based on the elections. Maybe we change the tax code, abortion laws. But when it comes to how we treat our adversaries, the policies we put in place to go after them, that doesn't seem to change irrespective of who is in the White House, with the exception of Donald Trump. And that is what I think is the main reason they are trying so hard to get rid of him, is because of that threat he poses to the long-term geopolitical goals and strategies put in place by the foreign policy establishment in Washington, D.C. So it's not just his personality and the fact that he annoys them. He is an existential threat to everything they have planned. Now, one thing I find kind of funny is that liberals during the Bush era, they were obviously very upset about the Iraq War. The neoconservatives, we got to get Bush and Cheney and Rumsfeld and all these horrible people out of the government who started this war. But if you look at the people who control the foreign policy in the Biden administration, these are the same people. They just weren't the people at the top at the time, but they were there in government supporting these policies. So I asked my liberal friends, if you were so mad about Dick Cheney in 2005, but you support the current administration, how can you do that when these are the same people? And so that's what I want to do today. I want to go through the people in the Biden administration who control the foreign policy and show to you that these people have been around a very long time, and they represent the continuity in our foreign policy, and that Trump was the one person who broke that up, which is why he is the real threat. So let's start with this. Trump, a statement from Trump, and this again, why they hate his guts. Trump's unprecedented campaign pitch: elect me to get revenge on the government. He swore in June to appoint a special prosecutor to go after the Bidens, and that he would totally obliterate the deep state, referring to a conspiratorial view of how the government operates. And as I will show you, that is not exactly conspiratorial. That is how the government operates. Policy, again, never changes, irrespective of who the president is, unless you have somebody who is stupid enough, like Trump, to actually go in there and start making some changes, and that is a huge, huge problem. So the four people I want to focus on are Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, Deputy Secretary of State Victoria Nuland, the National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, and the Director of the CIA Bill Burns. These represent the people in the Biden administration who really control foreign policy. Obviously, your Secretary of State, it says it right there. He's going around and controlling the State Department. NatSec, he is head of the National Security Council, and the CIA Director, of course, does our external operations in other countries, often working with the State Department. So these four people really represent the people who are enacting our foreign policy. So let's start with Anthony Blinken, our Secretary of State. What about Anthony Blinken? What is his background going back 30 years? Well, he was a member of the National Security Council from 94 to 2001, and then he was the staff director of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee from 2002 to 2008. And Joe Biden, when he was senator, was chair of this committee from 2001 to 2003, followed by Republican Richard Lugar from 03 to 07. So he served as staff director for Joe Biden, a Democrat, and later Republican was the chairman. Later, 2009 to 13, he was the National Security Advisor to Biden again. Then he was Deputy National Security Advisor to Obama from 13 to 15, and then the Deputy Secretary of State from 2015 to 2017 under Obama. And then when Trump came to office, what did he do? He left government. So the only time he didn't serve in government was when Trump was in office. And again, that tells you everything you need to know. And Blinken, he was a supporter of the Iraq War in 2003. So any idea, again, if you're a liberal saying, I'm no longer supporting these people who did the Iraq War, supported the Iraq War, well, yes, you are. Blinken supported the Iraq War. Of course, we know that Joe Biden, the president, also voted for the Iraq War. So all those liberals are gone now. All those anti-war liberals. Now they're pro-war, and everything they said between 2003 and 2008 was complete garbage. They didn't mean any of it. The only people who actually did mean that were people like Ron Paul, who's a non-interventionist, and a handful of true progressives. But everybody else, hypocrites. Funny too, I found a article from 2008 talking about NATO expansion, and Bush's, there's no way he was talking about including Georgia and Ukraine into NATO. And who was the person that was quoted in this article? Well, Anthony Blinken, who was very happy, as he says here, that President Bush was being very clear about our intentions when it comes to NATO. So Anthony Blinken, 2008, commenting on our aspirations to expand NATO, that was mentioned by, or brought up by George Bush, the president. So Anthony Blinken has been around for a very long time, and he represents permanent DC and the permanent policy in place, foreign policy that we're following. And again, here's a little gap here. If you see a little box that's yellowish there, only time he's not in government is when Trump was president. Very telling. The next person, Victoria Nuland. She is one of my favorite people. Obviously not my favorite person, but she pops up everywhere. Anytime there's a problem that's not good for us, she's involved somehow. And people don't know this, but she was the deputy for foreign policy for guess who? She was working originally for Dick Cheney from 03 to 05. She worked for Dick Cheney right when we were executing the Iraq War. So all you liberals out there who hated Cheney and who loved the current administration, well, Victoria Nuland, she was right there on the ground with Cheney, helping to plan the Iraq War. And then here she is getting sworn in with her husband Robert Kagan, who is a famous neocon who also helped plan the Iraq War over at PNAT, the Project for a New North American Century. And later, she was UN ambassador under George Bush from 05 to 08. And then she was a spokesman for the State Department from 11 to 13. The Assistant Secretary of, I think it was Eurasian Affairs from 2013 to 2017. And then when Trump came into power, once again, one time she wasn't in government, the little yellow boxes, that's when she left. And she went, where did she go for that time? She went to a think tank. And what think tank was that? Center for a New American Security, which is funded by Northrop Grumman, dozens of military contractors, Chevron, Amazon, Google, and other large corporations. So went from the government went to a think tank funded by the most powerful corporations in the world and the military-industrial complex. Shocker. And then when Biden got elected, she came back to the State Department. Again, representing this permanent policy that exists within our foreign policy establishment. and she is one of the main people that represents that. Old Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor. Well, Jake Sullivan, he was the Director of Public Policy under Obama from 11 to 13. He was the National Security Advisor for Vice President Biden from 13 to 14. And then he was the Chief Foreign Policy Advisor for Hillary Clinton. And he was probably would have been NASDAQ advisor back in 2017 had Hillary Clinton won, but no problem. Wait 4 years, you come back and do it in 2021. That's what happened. Now, interestingly, his wife, Margaret Goodlander, is also or was a fellow at the same place that Victoria Nuland was, the Center for a New American Security. Shocker. And she was an advisor to Joe Lieberman, Democrat, and John McCain. And then this part here was kind of funny. Well, not funny, but again, shows you how deep this deep state goes. She was a clerk for Merrick Garland, who is the current Attorney General, who is really the one going after Donald Trump by appointing the special counsel, Jack Smith. So, very, very small world. And there's Lieberman and old McCain and the old Merrick Garland. So now we have William Burns, the current CIA director. He is the guy who famously wrote the memo back in 2008 that was released by WikiLeaks saying that any more digging around in Ukraine would be a problem for the United States because Russia viewed Ukraine and the possibility of Ukraine becoming a part of NATO an existential threat. And we ignored that and had the Cuba in 2014. Again, Nuland was on the ground there. And we turned Ukraine into a very hostile state toward Russia, which has led to where we are today with this Russia-Ukraine war. So Bill Burns is one of those guys who knew better and apparently didn't do anything as far as trying to push back against this effort to really just go after Russia and use Ukraine as a proxy. Now, Bill Burr, he worked under George Bush from 2001 to 2005. He was in the State Department. And then from 2005 to 2008, he was the ambassador to Russia. Then he was the undersecretary in the State Department from 2008 to 2011. And he was the deputy secretary of state from 2011 to 2014. Went to the private sector. And then came back in 2021 as the CIA director. So he worked for George Bush. He worked for Obama. And now he's working for Biden. So once again, continuity within our foreign policy establishment. He's been around for a very long time, so you probably didn't know he was until he was nominated as CIA director. And that's the problem. All these people, they bubble up to the surface, but they've always been around. We just, the public, are unaware of it. Now, I found a very interesting statement it was a interview back in 2018 that was done at Politico, where, it was this person here, I think her name is Susan Glaser, Politico. She's interviewing Victoria Nuland, and they're talking about the State Department. And I think this little bit here really represents exactly what I'm talking about as far as Trump being a threat to the foreign policy establishment and why they view him so hostilely. Here's what she said in this interview. Glasser, before we go back to Russia, because obviously I want to understand, especially the last few years of America's policy towards Russia and where we are today with Trump, you left the State Department a year ago, and you did it literally right before the Trump administration was sworn in. A year later, none of these career ambassadors, which was a title that you ultimately attained in your career at the Foreign Service, I believe there were 6 a year ago, they're now all gone with the announcement that Tom Shannon will also be leaving. There's been this dramatic, what feels like assault on the notion of foreign service, on the Foreign Service. Tell me a little about that. You decided to leave, And what do you think the consequences are of not having people like you present inside anymore? And Newland says, well, as you say, some of us made early decisions that the positions that were being taken away, were just too much at odds with things that we had invested in for our whole careers. I was ambassador to NATO, deputy at NATO, and to hear a president call NATO obsolete before we had an opportunity to get into a conversation about its value for U.S. security, how to improve NATO. If that's what the president wanted, it just worried me in terms of my ability to serve. So some of us made those choices. Some of the senior people very much wanted to stay, and they were drummed out very quickly. Whether those were informed decisions or whether they were simply, we've got to lop off the old guard. Tom Shannon, my colleague, served hugely loyally, trying to glue the building together. So Trump came in and he cleared out many people in the State Department, and many of them quit. And to them, again, they view this as this huge threat where all their public service, all that they've done over the years have been just thrown away. And this goes back to the attitude that we saw throughout the Trump administration, that the bureaucrats within government felt they had the power or right to shape policy, not the actual elected president. And that's what I find so concerning. They thought they controlled what happened, especially when it comes to foreign policy in the State Department, not the people that 80 million people, or I guess in 16 it was 72, whatever it was, million people elected. And they thought they could override the president. And we heard it so often. Don't worry, we have so-and-so in there. He's going to control the president and make sure he doesn't do anything stupid. We had people within administration leaking, saying, we're working hard behind the scenes to make sure that, he doesn't do anything we don't like. So we have this entire bureaucracy of unelected officials thinking they can dictate to the president what he's supposed to do and control the policy, and not him. And if the president, who was one-third of the government, the executive, can't control the executive branch, the people who work for him, sorry, folks, we don't have a democracy. And that is what we're so proud of, why we hate Russia and China. They don't have democracies. But when you really look deep, it doesn't seem that we have much of a democracy either. If people like Victoria Nuland, Blinken, Sullivan, they can just perpetuate throughout government for years and years and years and years, control the policy, and when someone shows up who has a different opinion, they hate his guts, they attack him, they leak, they undermine him, and basically do everything they can to take him down, which is why I think right now they're working so hard to take down Trump, because if he gets back into office, I think he's very serious when he says he's going to destroy everything. He's going to take out the deep state. And they're worried about China policy. They're worried about this Ukraine war. They're worried about Africa. And Trump comes in, he ruins all that. That's decades of planning, all that effort they've, over the years to shape the world the way they wanted. And one person come in and really just throw a wrench in all that. So that is the true reason why they hate Trump. Not just his personality and his, the way he talks, his Twitter, or his Truth Social. He is absolutely an existential threat to the foreign policy establishment. And that is the one thing you can't jerk with. We can go back to JFK. He kind of messed with that. What happened to him? So that is where you get dangerous. I don't think they're going to pop the guy, but they will do something else, which is use lawfare, use these indictments to try to push him off. And it seems that many people within the Republican Party, the McConnell types, silently are 100% for it. And that is the real problem, is that the people who claim to be on our side in Congress, they're not. I'll keep pointing that out every chance I get. Only way they can take Trump out is if there is some sort of approval, whether openly or behind the scenes, from powerful people in the government that are Republicans. Otherwise, they could not do it. And I hope by showing you that the fact that all these people in the Biden administration work for Republicans too. I hope this proves it in some way, just how complicit both parties are together and just how much of a deep state we do have. And that's why I think it's important that we support Donald Trump and try to get him reelected in 2024 at all costs, because if he goes down, that's it, baby. They've won. So this is not just about Trump. This is a much bigger issue for me, much greater importance. And you want change in this country? People always say that. Oh, I want some change. I want change. Well, here's your opportunity. Support Donald Trump. You might actually get some real change. Well, that's it for now. If you are new to my channel, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.